This is the story of a forgotten medieval war, of a young soldier named Alaric, who stood against an empire not for glory, but to protect the last fragile pieces of hope, friendship, and humanity in a world drowning in fire and steel. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world still holds its breath and shadows cling to the earth like wounded soldiers, there exists a moment, a single heartbeat where history trembles. A moment when clang of steel has not yet broken the air. A moment before men decide the fate of kingdoms. And it was in that fragile breath of silence that our story begins. On a battlefield no map remembers, in a war no victor truly won. The kingdom of Eldoria had known peace for nearly a century. Its meadows stretched like oceans of gold, and its rivers carried songs of forgotten legends. But peace, as the old monks often whispered, is a guest that never stays long. When the northern empire of Renvec demanded tribute, the king refused, not out of arrogance, not out of pride, but because Eldoria's people had nothing left to give. Drought, plague, famine, these had already carved deep scars into the once thriving land. And yet, in their suffering, the people clung to hope like a lantern flickering in the night. The king's army was small, battered and weary, but among them was a young soldier named Alaric, a man whose heart carried more scars than his armor. He had never sought glory, he had never desired war. He wished only to protect the last fragments of the world he loved. His village had already burned, his family buried beneath the ashes of empire. All he had left was a promise, to fight so no other child would wake to the same flames. On the eve of battle, as the sky stained itself crimson with the setting sun, Alaric stood beside his closest friend, Edrin, overlooking the distant torches of the Ranvec invaders. "You ever wonder," Edrin murmured, his voice trembling, "if any of this will matter? If anyone will remember us?" Alaric watched the torches sway like angry stars. "We remember," he said softly, "and maybe that's enough." The night swallowed their words, carrying them into a darkness older than kings. Morning came like a roar. The field erupted with the clash of iron and the cries of men torn between fear and duty. Arrows rained from the clouds like black-feathered storms. Shields shattered, horses screamed. The earth itself trembled under the weight of thousands of footsteps. Alaric fought as though every swing of his sword was a prayer, not for victory, but for survival. He watched comrades fall, men he had trained with, laughed with, shared bread with. Their lifeless eyes stared toward a heaven that seemed to look away. Edrin stayed close, deflecting a spear that would have taken Alaric's life. "You owe me for that," he yelled, forcing a grin. But the grin broke when the second wave arrived. Ranvec's elite soldiers, towering figures wrapped in black iron, charged forward with shields larger than tombstones. Their formation devoured the battlefield, pushing Eldoria's wounded line back step by step. By noon, the sky was thick with smoke. By afternoon, the ground ran red. And by evening, the king fell. A stray arrow found his heart as he rallied his men, and when he crumpled, a silence spread across the battlefield more terrifying than any war cry. The Eldorian soldiers, seeing their sovereign collapse, faltered. Fear took hold, despair followed, and the enemy seized it with merciless precision. Alaric felt something break inside him, something he had kept buried since the night his village burned. He charged forward with a cry that pierced the din of war, not caring whether he lived or died, only that he would not watch his homeland crumble without a fight. But fate is cruel. A Ranvek blade struck Edrin across the chest, sending him to his knees. Alaric turned too late. Blood stained the ground like ink spilling from an ancient script. Edrin grasped Alaric's hand, forcing out a whisper. "Tell me, it meant something." "It did," Alaric said, voice cracking. "It still does." As his friend's hand slipped away, the world seemed to dim. The fire, the screams, the chaos, they all faded. All that remained was grief. Grief and the burning desire to end this tragedy. With the final remnants of the Eldorian army retreating, Alaric refused to flee. He fought through the enemy line, carving a path toward the Ranvek commander, a giant of a man clad in wolf fur and steel, his helm marked with crimson runes. The commander swung his blade in a sweeping arc, and Alaric barely blocked it. The impact numbed his arm. Their swords collided again and again, sparks flying like shooting stars. Exhaustion clawed at him, pain gnawed at his ribs. But he remembered the lantern of hope his people carried. He remembered Edrin's final words, and in that remembrance, strength returned. With a desperate thrust, Alaric drove his blade into the commander's heart. The giant fell, and with him the Ranvek line stumbled. It was not victory, but it was enough to save the survivors, enough to buy time, enough to give Eldoria a chance. As the invaders withdrew to regroup, the battlefield fell unnervingly silent, broken only by the wind brushing across the fallen as though trying to lull them into peace. Night draped itself over the field, covering the dead with a quiet dignity. Alaric staggered through the ruin, searching, hoping, fearing. He found Edrin's body where he had left it, untouched by scavengers or enemy blades. Kneeling beside his friend, he placed a hand over the wound, though he knew it was too late. In a shaking whisper, he said, "If anyone remembers us, it will be because of men like you." He carried Edrin past the broken shields and fallen banners to a grove of old oak trees, the same trees where Eldorian soldiers had sworn their oaths for centuries. Beneath those ancient branches, Alaric laid his friend to rest. The surviving soldiers gathered around, torches flickering in the dark. Some wept openly. Others stood in rigid silence, trying to swallow their grief. But Alaric's voice carried across the grove like a steady flame. "We fought today not for glory, but because we believed in a future worth defending. And though we lost more than we can ever replace, we still have that belief." A soldier asked, brokenly, "What do we do now?" Alaric looked at the stars, cold, distant, and yet shimmering with hope. "We rebuild," he answered. "We heal, and we honor those who cannot." History will not speak of the Battle of Eldoria. No songs will be written, no monuments built. The world forgets the small wars, the nameless fallen, the quiet bravery. But some stories live not in books, but in the hearts of those who carry the memory forward. Alaric would grow old long after the war faded into dust. He would tell children the story of the friend he lost, of the kingdom that refused to surrender, of the dawn that arrived even after the longest night. And every time he spoke, the past lived again, not as a tale of violence, but as a reminder that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand when everything around you tells you to fall. The medieval war of Eldoria was never about kingdoms or crowns. It was about people, about love, about the fragile, beautiful hope that even in the darkest times, humanity endures.